For this art history project, I decided to study and research Gordon Parks and his photography during the 1950s and 60s. And I decided to do this photo of the department store, which represents segregation of that time. Gordon Parks had many occupations. He was both a film director and a musician, a writer, a composer, but most prominently he was an amazing photographer and captured the essence of the lives of Black Americans in the 1950s. Gordon Parks was born into poverty and segregation in 1912 in Kansas, and I think his childhood and the way he grew up probably had to do with his interest in photography and being able to capture certain images that kind of represent what he experienced as well. Gordon Parks captured and presented essential photographs that portrayed the economic and social influences of racism. Also, a lot of his work focused on poverty, segregation, and racism itself. The reason I chose this picture is because I think it's interesting how we are all people in this world, yet in this time period, like in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, we were segregated between our color of our skin. And obviously those conditions right now, as current day, aren't as severe as they were, but we still have these issues of racism in the year of 2016. And I think that was interesting because I was able to relate the racism of that time period and kind of correlate those inferences with our time period now. This right here is the original photo, but I was also searching online and I was able to find other pictures of the two that are standing outside of the entrance when they're actually in the store. There was a description provided in the civil rights photography website that we visited as a class, and what I noticed is that Gordon Parks, instead of focusing so much on brutality and stuff like that in protests, he focused mostly on like a certain family too, and he was able to kind of like dive into this family life and how they live throughout this time period and how they kind of struggle with it or how they deal with it. Gordon Parks was essentially able to focus more on the intimacy and human experience of this time period, which I think is really important, rather than just being someone who generalizes everything. So as for the history of this picture, there was a lot of segregation in this time period. And as for this description of it, it was in 1956 where Gordon Parks focused on a particular family. And you can already tell that by the colored entrance sign, people were segregated. It was just a known fact. Like, there was no way of going around it, and there were certain people, like Rosa Parks, who tried to fight against it by sitting on the front of the bus when she actually, by societal expectations, was supposed to be sitting in the back of the bus. There was all this segregation, and it's just, we're all people. Like, there shouldn't be any difference between what stores you can go into and what stores you can't, because it completely defeats this purpose that we all are equal. There were a lot of civil rights movements in this time period. There was Martin Luther King and all his speeches in the 1960s. And what a lot of people were fighting for was their civil rights to not have to be labeled by a colored entrance sign. What I thought was interesting is that you see this beautiful woman standing outside of this door next to a very young girl, and they're dressed so nicely, just as any other person could be dressed, yet they are subjected to the colored entrance, which is just absolutely awful, but that is just how life was at the time period for African Americans. I think Gordon Parks does a phenomenal job of capturing the segregation in a very subtle way, and I think that just kind of speaks to the audience that's looking at his pictures. This was my bibliography, and thank you for watching.